Mayne and Charles Hyland. Hello, both of you. You're in New Zealand, so our time zones are completely scrambled. Thank you very much for making time for this conversation. I think what initially attracted me to the work that you're doing jointly is that we've had this early stage boom in regenerative agriculture, regenerative farming. All sorts of big companies are now pledging themselves to head in this direction. It might be PepsiCo, it might be Unilever or Nestle or whatever. One of the things that concerns me in all of this is I've seen various different forms of this agenda come through. Organic has been a long-standing version. There have been various things around natural foods and so on. And the labeling and the concepts quite often become contested quite quickly. So people start to say, but no, you know, I'm better than you and we're better than they are and so on. So I think one of the critical needs in terms of regenerative farming is going to be some form of certification of different aspects of that more systemic approach. And one crucial element of that will be certifying the health and restoration of soils. So Anna, maybe I can start with you. I know the story to some degree, this story began with you, maybe back in 2012 or even before then. So where did all of this come from?
Well, thanks for having us, John. It really began for me back in sort of 2009, 2010. I grew up on a small dairy farm in New Zealand and wasn't interested in the fertilizer part of the farm. And as I matured, was still distant from that sector of the industry. But when I went to work for actually the first Māori dairy company that got started here in 2009, my job was to talk to dairy farmers about that opportunity. And after about 18 months there, I went to a workshop and established that, was taught there that crucially, there are in fact 2 different soil tests being used here in New Zealand to determine fertilizer recommendations. And at that stage, I genuinely questioned, why are there 2 methods and which one is the best for, first of all, I went to the economics. And certainly, of course, you know, the economics and ecosystem life are non-exclusive. And so I decided to research that question. And as my concerns grew about the gaps and the differences in those 2 techniques, very fortunately, I met Charles in 2012. And systematically, we have worked hard on identifying the gaps, which have led to this tool that we offer.
Charles, your background was something like a biogeochemical background. I mean, how did you come into all of this?
In 2002, I was hired as a researcher at Cornell University, working in a soil biogeochemistry lab. What soil biogeochemistry is, it's the academic study of how substances applied to land, to soil, either stay in the soil or are lost to the environment, either to the atmosphere or to surface waters or to groundwater.
Yeah.
And I worked there for 10 years, first working on projects that clarified exactly how phosphorus and nitrogen problems on farms come to be. My work focused exclusively on developing solutions to the problems that are pervasive throughout Western agriculture globally. And a large part of that was working with a then new concept called biochar. And in 2006, I was a founding member of the International Biochar Initiative. And I worked for the next, really up until now, since 2006, on developing ways to use biochar and composts and other materials to reduce the environmental impact of Western farming practices. And in 2012, when I came to New Zealand, every country has its own set of environmental challenges, and I immediately recognized what the most significant challenges are in New Zealand, and it was a pleasure to team up with Anna, who has worked in the agricultural industries her entire career here. We've developed something since then that not only assesses the environment, but is perfectly suited to put hard numbers on the benefits of regenerative agriculture. To me, the difference between regenerative agriculture and organic agriculture is organic agriculture is focused almost entirely on regulations around what substances can be used and what practices can be done on the farm, whereas regenerative agriculture it seems entirely output-based. What are the results of the practices that the farmer is using?
Anna, if you were talking to just a normal dairy farmer or an arable farmer and trying to explain why it is that regenerative practices are important on any farm, how would you do that? And in terms that just a bog standard farmer would get his or her brain around?
In order to improve our situation where we are on each farm and each orchard, we need to have a starting point. And that's where our scale 0 to 10 assists the farmer and grower, even consumer in time, understand from an ecosystem standpoint where we are, what is the actual impact of the past farming techniques on this land and waterways. And so that's the first thing. What has the impact been to this point? And then through our criteria list, we educate around, we have 8 categories, 64 data points. Are you hitting that checklist? And if you're hitting the checklist, then we know that you are farming kindly, both to your soil, your water, air, animals. So yeah, we need a starting point and a way to assist farmers to really have actually sort of more understanding of how artificial fertilizers are so destructive, but how they need not be, and how we can have both. We need not compromise production or actually have detrimental economic effect when people transition from, conventional farming. And I mean, when I say conventional, I mean conventional fertilizer regimes. That's the core causality. That's the destruction no one really worldwide is actually addressing. But we are, and to say that if you learn a few more things about how fertilization technique is done, and the world really does need to establish, I think that's where a lot of work needs to be done, and we can assist on fertilization technique and recommendation writing.
10 is on your scale. Is that good or bad?
Great.
That's the best.
Okay. And if you're then a farmer and you're regenerating your soils and your team come in and tell you you're doing a good 8.5, 9, 9.5, whatever it is, and you have improvement plans that'll take you even higher, perhaps never quite to 10. How do you then sell that, and how do you sell it to whom?
For the consumer, I think there's a lot of potential, and this is something that I've been working on my entire career in the background, is there's the potential to put an easily understandable environmental footprint number on packaging for the consumer, so that when the consumer is looking through all the choices they have at the market, they can see not only what's conventional, what's organic, but what's the environmental footprint of these products. And if that's how I'm going to decide what products I buy, I can choose the products that have the greatest environmental benefits. So our system puts a 1 to 10 rating on the environmental status of farm systems, but potentially more importantly, if you look at those numbers over time, we can show what's been the benefit of these regenerative practices over the last year, over the last 10 years. I'm a big fan of organic farming, but I know from experience that some organic farming methods are, in my opinion, less sustainable than conventional. As an example, if a farm converts from conventional grain production to organic grain production, they can no longer use pesticides, which is generally a good thing. However, I've seen cases where the fossil fuel use rises exponentially with conversion to organic farming, because rather than using herbicides, the farmer has to drive a diesel tractor through their fields every few weeks to remove weeds. So if I'm concerned with climate change, that's not something that's going to appeal to me. Whereas our system is, would clarify that issue, not just for regenerative farms, but for organic and conventional as well.
What's your game plan? Are you going to sell out? Are you going to license this to a bigger player? Because I doubt that you're going to do this going, as Charles said in an earlier conversation, knocking on stable door after stable door. You've got to have a scaling mechanism.
Yeah, I think that ultimately we license to governments to use, once the tool is understood, we can license to different governments around the world, and then they can use it, having made policies. And that's where politicians are struggling at the moment. They need options, hard scientific, evidence-based options to then write policy from, and then have the tools to implement throughout each nation. And that there is great work being done in the UK, and that's why I was so happy to speak to you again. I do think the UK are leading out on this, and can we assist with that? But certainly licensing to governments, because the world needs to hook onto something, and we can't wait another 10, 20 years to decide what that is. You've got the Rodale Institute in America working at an organic regenerative certification. Well, what's that? You've got the Global Farm Metric coming out of the UK, which I've done a bit of reading on, which I think, we'd like to do some work with them to see if a global standard can be met, like a Codex Planetarius, that's been mooted. Nature Positive Production's been mooted out of the UN through their Action Track 3 work. We can define nature positive production utilizing this tool. We can define regenerative production utilizing this tool. So, the other thing is, Queen Elizabeth asked last year, bring the lawmakers. So I'll be bold to say, please have a look at this, and perhaps it can be law, yes. The feedback when working with the farmers and growers, they're the ones at the coalface getting finger pointed at and, growled at, and it's sad. Whereas we can return, farmers and growers to good farmers and growers through the use of the tool. The farmers who are farming kindly, they'll pop out at 8 and 9s, and those that are destroying our ecosystem will come out at a 2 and a 3. And so the excitement of the learning of all of how the tool works is what I wanted to talk to you about. Is the farmers and growers themselves have been, farming and growing for years. Some have been educated through agriculture universities, but things have been missed. And that's what that excitement of fresh learning, and sort of like a renaissance in a humanity's understanding of how we grow and produce food is the exciting thing as well.
Yeah, I remember seeing in one science fiction book the human species being described as a disease of trees, just that one line. And I think in the same way we have been historically a disease of soils. And I hope that your work and the work of people like you
Yes.
will help reverse that trend, or perhaps create a different reality. So thanks immensely for spending the time to explain some of the background. We will put in links to some of the work that you're doing for people who want to follow up. Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you, Charles. And again, good luck to you both.
Thank you, John. Action
Thank you,
22. Thank you.